Let's go live now to Wits University. Mbali Tatani, also part of the SABC team, covering this developing story for you tonight, Mbali. And you've been getting the views of students there. What do the young people make of what we've just witnessed?
Well, certainly, Tebegile, as all eyes are on the Oval Office and the White House in Washington, D.C., a number of people have been glued to either their screens or even their radio stations, trying to get a glimpse of what is taking place in the Oval Office. And that follows that meeting, which is currently underway between U.S. President Donald Trump as well as President Cyril Ramaphosa. The presidency characterizing this meeting as a meeting to reset relations between the two nations. And I'm now going to bring in some students here who have been camped outside Wits University monitoring proceedings taking place in Washington. Silas, thank you so much for your time this evening here in SABC News. Let's start off here. We've seen and heard this meeting take place. What are your thoughts so far on what is taking place in this very important meeting that President Cyril Ramaphosa has gone all the way to Washington to sit down with U.S. President Donald Trump?
Thank you. Evening to the viewers at home. Look, we can just take it back to say one. I think Donald Trump is being a propagandist as he is, as always. He's still bringing the issues of white killings in South Africa, and that's entirely not true. But secondly, I think our president is very clear to say that we are there for trade and investment, and I think that is what is very important for our country and our continent as a whole. So look at it like this. Africa is the second largest continent in the whole world. Asia has now been dominated by trade and everything else. China is growing in Asia. So now there needs to be a new central place where market can run. That's why now South Africa and Africa becomes the central point. That's why you see people like Rupert who are there at Oval, who are now looking at the Starlink. Look, Starlink was unleashed. SpaceX started to release your satellites back into space since 2019. And today they have right about 7,000 in that space, which means now they need to grow into a new market. And a new market is where? It's South Africa, where there's potential. It's Africa, where there's potential, where we're still underdeveloped. And indirectly, this is going to impact our institutions like Wits University here. Look, the funding that was cut off by Trump affected our institutions. Most of the funding for our students in the health science side comes from the US, which means our research has been impacted. So Donald Trump has affected.
Give other students a chance. Silas, thank you so much for your time. I'm also now going to bring in Ustembiso. Ustembiso, how do you think, when you look at the rapport of the president and how he handled, this meeting, which was in front of all the cameras and in front of all the media, what do you make of how he handled himself and his rapport during this meeting?
Well, good evening to all the viewers out there. Well, to be honest, I'm actually somewhat disappointed in the manner of approach that Cyril Ramaphosa took, first and foremost with the delegation that he took there. I mean, the fact that you take most of the people that are owning companies like your Vodacoms, I mean, Rupert has got shares there, Cyril himself has shares in MTN. And these are the companies that when you think about it, if Starlink was to come to South Africa, it would rival them. And Starlink initially had wanted not to have a base here at which it can then foster growth in terms of jobs and job creation and the likes. But instead it wanted to operate outside of South Africa. So now in that context, when you see that happening, you then become disappointed because it means that there's also the question of money involved. Because we can only ask ourselves the question that with all the propaganda and all the intelligence that the US has in its disposal, how do they think that there can be some sort of a genocide in South Africa? It really doesn't make sense. And when I look at it, I think Cyril Ramaphosa a bit he allowed himself to be played by Trump in the sense that now he's putting himself in a corner in which now America will have to dictate everything. You do this, you do that, you speak to this man, you don't speak to him. And it's proven because Rupert himself did say we need Starlink, and that only shows that there is still that capitalist agenda that is continuing to reshape and reform itself in South Africa.
All right. Thank you so much, Tembi. So I'm also not going to bring in Angelique Tembegile. And Angelique, maybe let's start off with and talk about what Tembi touched on, and that was the delegation that was alongside or is alongside President Ramaphosa during that meeting. I mean, the likes of, Rupert as well. We also know that Johan Rupert is there. We also know the likes of golfers. Ernie Els is also forming part of this delegation. What do you make of those who are supporting the president during this visit?
Thank you, Mbali. So in terms of delegation, I think that Rupert, as an undeniable and undisputed representative of the private sector, is there as a form of economic diplomacy. And that is really good because it shows that this is not just political. We're actually looking for ways to advance ourselves, not just economically, but also in terms of our relations with other countries. And obviously, we're talking things like trade, we're talking investments, and as the successful businessman that he is, Rupert would have really, really proper insights on that. And then in terms of the golfers, I think that they are more of a cultural leverage, because it's no secret that Trump loves golf, and even the president taking both of them, he asked for one of the two, and he said, actually, I'll bring both of them. And I think that is a form of cultural leverage, and you can use them as a soft power tool in order to just maybe soften Trump up and let the defenses down. Because he's already praising them, he's already giving them compliments, and he also brought him a golf book. So that's a very strategic development. I really do hope, though, that behind all the golf smiles, there is a proper strategy, because these are all white men and they're not actually a representation of what South Africa looks like. We're one of the most unequal countries in the world. We have GBV, we have black poverty, we also have inequality. We're known for inequality. So having these white men going out there to represent us might not be a true reflection of who we are as a country, and that is a bit concerning. I just really do hope, though, that the meeting will be a success.
Thank you so much, Angelique. I'm also going to bring in our last guest here, Kamohelo. Kamu, your expectations now that we know that this meeting, we've seen, just a glimpse of that meeting. They are now going to be behind closed doors to continue, discussing some bilateral relations between these two countries. What are your expectations in terms of the outcomes of this meeting?
Yeah, I think this is when the real meeting is going to start. What we saw there was Donald Trump keeping to the lie that there's a white genocide in South Africa, because he even brought in fake news from Twitter showing Julius Malema singing "Shoot the Poor," and was not willing to listen to anyone who was saying there is a crime problem in South Africa, but there's no targeted crime towards white farmers or white people in South Africa. And I also think that our president himself, in front of the world, failed to dispel this myth that white people are being targeted. South Africa is one of the only countries where those Boers, including the 49 Boers, will live in a better state more than they are living now as refugees in America. So I think we're looking at the outcomes of saying that the AGOA trade deal between the USA and South Africa must still be there. The tariffs must stay at 10%, if not lower. We must be able to speak about a relationship between the USA and South Africa that is beneficial to both parties. Our president failed to say what he said to us in Parliament. He said he was not going to be bullied, but that was just a spectacle of Trump perpetuating this idea in order for Starlink to come and for the USA to have a leverage over South Africa.
Kamohelo, thank you so much for your time. Of course, those are some of the views, Tembegile, we are hearing here from some of the Wits University students who've been monitoring those developments coming out from Washington, D.C. Some of them, those views also being quite critical of the president in terms of how he handled themselves. You could have heard there Kamohelo saying that the president said that they will not be bullied. And he seems to think that, the president was playing into the terrain or the arena of the U.S. president and failed, to continue to highlight the notion that there is no such thing as a white genocide taking place in South Africa.
Balita Tani out at Wits University on a cold night in Johannesburg. Reaction from students there to the briefing between President Cyril Ramaphosa and Donald Trump at the White House.